Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about The Outsider Season 1, Episode 3 is called Dark Uncle. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So obviously the investigation continues. I don't even think we actually talked about the clothes left in the barn last episode. I think we forgot to talk about that scene. It was such a small thing at the end, but that's kind of what sets the events in motion at the start of this one. The cops find these clothes. Notably, one of the socks just kind of cracks in half as if it's frozen.
Yeah, that was unusual.
Yeah, and they find some weird substances and whatnot, which Ralph finds out about all this stuff. And it kind of sets them on an investigation kind of off the books. Because, he's kind of eaten up with wanting the answers to this because it is such a confusing case, because all the evidence is contradicting. And to the point where him and Sablo, the actual cop that's on duty, they end up teaming up with the lawyer and his guy, what's his face, Alec. So probably my favourite moment of directing the whole episode is actually when they decide to go and meet them in the hopes of sort of trying to figure this out together, because they're all interested in getting to the truth. And it's funny because Bateman didn't direct this episode. This was someone else.
Yeah, I could tell.
Yeah. And it felt a bit more, less flashy. Even though this scene, which we're about to talk about, is in effect kind of flashy because it's very different than how you normally shoot a scene. But it's shot in the sense where they're in the lawyer's office, and the entire scene is shot from outside the window. It's one shot, and the shot's just kind of slowly tracking in towards the window. But why I like this so much is because, unlike some of the things in the first couple of episodes that I couldn't justify, where I couldn't look at it and go, I don't understand why this weird choice was made to look more artistic, I get this one. This one makes sense to me. It works because the whole idea is that they're literally in the visual, they're in a box, and we can see them in this box, but everything around them is concrete, and they're trapped in a box, and this is showing that they are trapped in their own little world, and that to solve this case, they're going to have to go outside their comfort zone. They're going to have to go outside their perceived world. It's so simple. I mean, the scene, it gets closer and closer to them until they fill the frame, and at the end of that scene, the decision is made to contact this PI, Holly Gibney, who suggested, and so the end of the scene is literally them deciding to contact someone who's a little bit outside the box. It's such a simple thing, but it's really effective because I can back it up completely with what's going on in the story.
It is. I still think, so generally speaking, on a TV show, you'll often have like a guest director do the first episode, or in this case, the first two. And they will set the tone and the style for the show. And I can still feel some of those tricks kind of just being used just wherever. Like there's one where it just slowly rises up. I think it's looking at a road or something, and the camera just slowly rises up over the course of this transitionary scene, and it's kind of there just because these are the things we were doing in the first couple. Unlike that one, there wasn't really any point to it. It was just to make it look flashy, which I was feeling those still.
I wasn't feeling it as frequent as the first two, though. It definitely wasn't in my face. And there was a lot of moments where it did something far more subtle than going flashy that I kind of liked as well. So yeah. I actually think the direction's improved, bizarrely. Usually it goes down after the guest director for the first couple of leaves, but...
Yeah. I think it's improved, but it's still hampered by the style that it's been kind of thrust upon it. Like I said, there are less of these instances, but they're still there.
But the restraint is there, and it's nice to see that. The plot from there, of course, they meet with this PI, and we're interested in sort of this new main character, this Holly Gibney, who is played by Cynthia Erivo, who I knew from somewhere. I couldn't have told you what it was, but I looked her up, and she's from Bad Times at El Royale, and she was also in Widows. So I knew her face from stuff. Yeah. But she is kind of an interesting character. She's kind of, she's got this like perfect memory. She's got this perfect brain for figuring things out.
Yeah, because it's not even memory necessarily. Because she used an example of she can tell you if you pick a date like 200 years from now, she can tell you what day it is. But if you ask in the next couple of weeks, she has no idea. So I don't know, is that she just memorized that far ahead in the future, or for whatever reason she can figure? Because she says she can work it out faster than any computer, not that she can remember it.
Well, no, it wasn't just memory. There's also like a sort of math prodigy kind of element to this as well. But she also brings up like baseball stats and things like that, which are clearly memory.
Those ones are, yeah, definitely.
So memory's a big factor of it. I wasn't saying that was the only thing she could do. But she, she's very particular. She kicks someone off a bar stool because she says that's her stool. And they come to see her, and she brings up the idea of a doppelganger, and it kind of explains. And obviously, she's not a shapeshifter yet. She's just kind of talking about the myth of the doppelganger, and that everyone has a double somewhere on Earth.
Honestly, I thought this was one of the worst written bits of the episode, in the sense of doppelganger as a concept is pretty well known. Not, this isn't like a sci-fi concept that it's explaining. This is something most people are familiar with. And I feel like both of the two characters who she was telling it to, being like, what? Never heard of it. Felt a little bit weird to me.
I don't know. I don't think I'd know what a doppelganger was if I didn't watch Nerd Shit.
Okay, maybe. I know lots of people who do know what it is, who don't watch it.
I literally learned that word from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Of course you did.
Like, I don't know.
Of course you did.
If I didn't watch Nerdy Shit, I don't know if I would know what a doppelganger is.
Maybe. I know lots of people who don't watch any of this sort of stuff who know what it is. So maybe this is just.
You've had conversations with random people about what doppelgangers are?
Like people at work. I work with like.
And doppelgangers come up often in conversation, do they?
It has come up. You would not believe the shit that comes up in my workplace.
Whatever.
When a 50-year-old woman who doesn't watch any of this sort of stuff knows what a doppelganger is, I feel like, okay, the majority of people might do.
I don't know. I buy that two, cops from some random town don't know what a doppelganger is. That doesn't feel that weird to me. This is sometimes you bring in this weird, like, because in my circles people know what it is. I think this is weird that these characters don't.
Wait, no, that's my point. Is I am aware that this is anecdotal evidence. I did kind of, I was aware of that, but it still struck it as weird to me because this isn't like in just my circle on Twitter, for example. This is in all of life. Like it's quite varied people that I feel like safer in extrapolating from that.
Yeah, right. But I actually quite like the end of this scene because she comes back and sort of thanks Ralph for drinking more than he felt comfortable with because she could tell that it's not something he likes to do, at least not anymore. Almost kind of get, because this is the thing, it kind of set up this idea from a previous scene in the therapist office where there's just one scene in the therapist office where he's talking about how things are at home, and he ends up talking about his wife and how they're in a pretty good place, and we see that again actually even going back earlier in the episode. It clearly shows that they have a pretty good relationship where she comes home and kind of tries to talk him out of working on the case, and he's clearly not going to, but he does like sort of stop for a minute to just sort of ask her how her day was, and it feels very kind of pleasant. But in the therapist's office, he's describing, but there was that 6-month period after her son died where I wasn't sure if we were going to make it, and and that makes sense. This is the sort of thing, as he puts it, like this either puts you closer together because it's this shared thing that no one else can relate to, or it'll split you apart because it's such a traumatic event that you just can never.
Yeah, it feels pretty common, as an idea.
But we get this, and that's actually maybe one of the only things I didn't like about the episode is I didn't necessarily like the way they did this little flashback as he was talking about. What is he talking about? I mean, it's kind of the point was that he wasn't talking about it. He was kind of glossing over it and didn't want to talk about it. But we see this little quick flashback of him drinking in a bar, and he goes to break up a fight, but instead of kind of breaking it up, he ends up just getting angry and seemingly starts beating the shit out of both of them, and then rushes back to his drink to like finish his drink. So it's showing us that he had a drinking problem and an anger problem. Now I don't necessarily don't like the development here because I actually think the first couple of episodes set up the idea that he did have an anger problem. The way he went after Bateman, the way he immediately accused him of touching his son.
Anger is not the word I'd use necessarily, but rash.
Yes, but you can definitely see it's an extension of what we're seeing here in this flashback. This is some leftover trauma that he's still carrying around with him, and so I actually think from a just what it's doing perspective, it's fine. I just thought the way it was shot was kind of a little bit, just cheesy, I guess. The way that he kind of went over and started fighting. The music was played was in slow motion. It felt a little bit over dramatic.
Yeah, I get that. It wasn't the best moment.
But that clearly set up this idea that he maybe has some sort of drinking issue, and then we see him in a bar with Holly, and he's drinking a beer. It's not nothing too extreme, but she comes back after and says, "Oh, I know you don't like to drink," and she doesn't know that. I mean, she hasn't heard that before. This is something she's deduced just through who she is. She says, "Oh, you don't like to drink too much, but you did it to make me feel comfortable. Thank you," and walks off. So I quickly kind of liked her as a character. I think she, is weird, but I appreciated her performance.
I believe the word you're looking for is unique.
Yeah, she used the word as unique as used a couple times. Yes.
Or the alien is what they called her beforehand, I think.
I don't know if they called her alien, but it says something about her spaceship. It was implied alienness. So that sets her off to go. So what she's been hired to do, she's been hired to go and retrace the steps of where Maitland was when they were on that vacation. Where the van came from, and when he was at the hospital. And what's interesting here, so she goes and she does a little bit of investigating. She talks to the guy at the parking lot of the barbecue restaurant that we're talking about last episode. She goes to the hotel where the family were staying. I was almost like, were they doing like, I don't know if this was just kind of like a stylistic thing. I'll have to wait and see more of it, but I was kind of getting the vibe that she might actually be able to sort of like, we're actually she's almost supernatural herself, and that she can seem to relive like things that have happened in there, kind of like
I felt like it was more stylistic.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, because this is the thing, because we're dealing with a shapeshifter, I'm not sure how supernatural some of the other characters are going to be.
I took it more along the lines of things we see in Hannibal or Sherlock.
Sure, yeah, but it's more just a representation of what she's sort of thinking about as she's looking around. Yeah, no, I mean, it's very likely that's what it is, but I was sort of thinking that it could go that way if they really want to.
I mean, if they wanted to, then, I mean, it's not out of the possibility, but it wasn't my first thought at all.
It was the way she asked before, because I was thinking about it in this scene where she asked, like, what room were they staying in? Like, she wanted to go and visit the actual room, and I was almost wondering, like, does she have to stand in the real place and she'll get, not psychic vibes, but whatever you wanted.
No, I get what you mean.
Call it. And she talks to the guy, and I actually kind of like this little scene. The guy where she's talking to the security guard dude. Just simple little things, but she, he's kind of asking what she's there for, and she explains. And he's like, "Oh, sorry, we scrub the tape every 5-6 days, whatever it is." And he's just kind of like, "Oh, he's mentioned the police there. You're doing this sort of for the police. Like, can I ask why?" And she says, "Oh, the van was used to abduct a child who was then murdered." And the guy's reaction I just thought was played really well, where he just looks so kind of like, he wasn't expecting that answer. He wasn't expecting something quite that dark. And he turns around and says, "Oh, you're a PI?" And she's like, "Yeah, you want to see my license?" And he's like, no, that's okay, but can I get a business card? And he makes it very clear that if there's anything he can help with, like, call me. And that might
because he gives her card as well. Yeah. His card.
And he might not come back up. This might just be what it is on its own. I think that's fine. But I like the interaction. I thought it was well handled.
I wasn't sold on it at first. I liked it more in hindsight after we have the interaction at the the care home hospital.
Yeah, the receptionist won't let her in because she thinks she's part of the press. And because there's been people here asking. But the curious detail is, because obviously we hear, okay, press have been here, presumably because his son has just been, not convicted, but like arrested for murder and then killed. But it turns out that that's not the case, that this is a separate thing. The police were here to ask him questions about something, which she's going to have to look into later. And of course, we'll sort of, because there's this subplot throughout the episode in this prison. And I actually got really confused. The first time we see these characters, I'm like, am I forgetting something from last episode? Who are these people? Who are these people? And as it went on, it just became clear that this was just a new thing. And I liked how it kind of like tied in towards the end. Like, okay, this is what this is and who this character is. And what's really neat about it is that so Holly goes and looks up what's going on, what crime was committed here that the police were investigating, and it was a child killing. And it's this guy, because in the prison we have these two characters. The main guy who's in there, he is kind of scared, and there's this new arrival, this bigger guy who looks like he wants to murder the other dude. And there's a really horrific scene actually where he gets like a plastic blade out of his leg. He's like slicing his leg with his fingernail, and then eventually it pulls out this thing that he snuck in, and I'm like, oh, this is quite gruesome actually.
It's grim, yeah.
Yeah, and then when the first guy feels threatened, he takes his lens out of his glasses and starts sharpening it, which you think is to defend himself, and it's actually also a pretty grim scene at the end when, you know, the guard who's clearly been paid off, you know, leaves a couple of doors open, and this big guy comes in, and he says, "Yeah, I'm not letting you have this," and he slits his own throat.
Yeah,
super dark.
I like the parallels here as well with what we got with Terry in the end of the first episode, I think it was, where, you know, when he was in prison for a bit, and they were all like, "Okay, we know what you did. You're not getting out of here alive."
Joe, what I liked about that is that even before we get to, okay, this is how it ties into the main plot, because for a while it's just this own standalone little thing, and you don't know what's happening. Because we had that stuff with Terry in the prison, there was that one thematic link that made it feel, okay, this doesn't feel out of place. I don't know what it's doing yet, but it doesn't feel out of place. But of course, you find out that this first guy is accused of being a child killer, and it's hard not to immediately go, well, did he?
Did the same thing happen here?
Well, I mean, it makes sense. Like, you know, if the cut at the hospital that Terry got was given that in this episode we seem to see it pass on to a new person, like, was this the previous person? Because he worked at the hospital. This guy was an orderly at the hospital. Yeah. So was Terry just the one who came next? Was this the guy's previous victim? It makes a lot of sense, and it makes this throat slitting moment really tragic at the end, where he feels he has to kill himself to just escape.
He can't get out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So. And, you know, and obviously it teases it a bit more heavier before we get there, because he gets a note at one point saying child killer. So I mean, it's this, you know, it links in a bit more as it goes on, but
yeah.
I thought that was effective.
One of my favorite moments comes kind of in the middle of this stuff.
Is this when she calls? Yeah. Ralph. Is this where she says sometimes she likes to hear the voice of someone who's on her side, and then he just awkwardly doesn't say anything for the next 10 seconds?
A good 20 seconds of just silence, isn't there?
Yeah, I liked that moment a lot as well. I think I liked it because she's reaching out because she needs that comfort, and he's just not ready to give it to her. And I think he wants to. Like, I think when it awkwardly ends the phone call, I think inside he regrets not saying something. But and I think that's part of his arc. I think, you know, he will become, you know,
a better person.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
You know, all the usual stuff that you have in an arc for a quote unquote hero character.
I guess better, in this case, it maybe less a better person, because he was probably a great stand-up dude before his son died. It's maybe more healthier. Yeah, he'll be healthier by the end, if he's not dead.
Well, yeah, there's always that. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
That's true. You could go out a hero and then die, and that's entirely possible. Now, I like this because she's just explaining the details of what, and she's going to look into whatever this other police case was. But it's a really nice little moment. This was another moment of direction that I thought was really good, because it didn't overdo it. It just the camera just rested on him as he was standing there in silence.
Yeah, I feel just lingering there. It's confidence that I didn't feel in those first couple of episodes.
Yeah. So no, that was good. So yeah, speaking of Ralph, though, other stuff with him, the Maitland daughter, the younger one who's been seeing the shapeshifter, you know,
Jessa, I want to say.
Jessa, that sounds right. She says, "I need to see the policeman. I need to see, you know, Ralph." And obviously, you know, let me just the Maitland, Glory, that's her name. So Glory's like, you know, and we see a couple of times in this episode where the daughters are being kind of kicked out of school, not like expelled because they didn't do anything wrong, but like it's causing too much hassle having them there because all the other kids and parents are treating them weirdly, but so she's not thrilled about the idea of having Ralph back over, but she's like, okay, if it's to make my daughter feel better, she explains, look, I just want you here to make her feel better. Don't, you know, do any shit.
Just come in, listen to the message, and go.
Yeah. And he's like, okay, all right, okay, I'll do my best. And so they're all sitting there, and she's explaining that she had this dream. I mean, she's told it's a dream. Obviously, Jessa doesn't think it was a dream.
She's adamant it's not, and she's probably right, but that's not the point.
And I felt bad for Ralph in this scene, because even though he did ask a question or two, I didn't feel like he was asking questions that felt policey. It felt more like he was going along with it, and it made more sense.
Explain what she was saying.
Yeah, because afterwards, when his wife, Jeannie, when she says, "Hey, can I talk to you in private?" You know, like Glory, she says, like, sure, and she explains that, you know, when they had their son, like, if he had a nightmare, it was much better to try and go along with it than to just sort of adamantly say, "No, it was a nightmare. You know, nothing's real. Just forget about it." You know, she kind of explains this, and she convinces her to let her talk to her to the daughter,
and it was at this point you get the idea that Ralph was probably a pretty good dad. He clearly knew what he was doing at this point.
Well, the good thing is later on when we get a story about Terry, is that it sounds like they're very similar dads in actual fact. Like what his tactic was, it sounded like it was actually kind of the same thing. We'll get to that. We'll get to the Tim Vergulish written scene in a minute.
I laughed so much.
Oh, jeez. So she reveals a couple of interesting things. One, she says, well, this is not the right order, but I'll put the interest in my order of interest. One is that it was inky and there was a substance, and all I could think was like, because obviously, Ralph's listening to this. He's down at the bottom of the stairs, just sort of listening, and obviously we heard about this substance that was found that didn't match anything. At first they thought it was semen, but it wasn't. Then they thought, oh, well, maybe it's like oil or something, or it's something from the cows or whatever in the barn.
Yeah, something for the farm, but they're like, nope, doesn't match anything we can think of.
Yeah, and obviously we're thinking, it's like shapeshifter residue.
We didn't even mention some of the most interesting stuff from that information yet.
Yeah. Well, it's relevant now, so there it is. And then she says, the first time she saw him, because we were speculating, did he show up as her dad? And the first time he did. And the second time he still kind of was, but he was looking a bit iffy. Like,
he said his face looked blurred, like someone had tried to rub it out.
Yeah, and that's, again, tying back into the information earlier, is that there was fingerprints on the van. There was, like, different sets and stuff at the farmhouse where it was like the belt buckle had them. Where it's Terry's fingerprints, but it's like it's an 80-year-old version of Terry. The fingerprints specialist was like, no, I can tell this is the same person, but they're much older.
Which makes me suspect, okay, so this shapeshifter, it doesn't necessarily physically age quicker, but the body degrades.
Yeah.
And it has to get a new victim, right? A new target to take over.
Yeah, presumably what we were seeing in the last episode was in between victims, where it's just like this, mess of...
Yeah.
Well, unless that was like just the very end of Terry, where it was still technically Terry, but just really deformed and...
Yeah, because that sounded like the erased face that she was describing.
Yeah, the blurry face, yeah. And then the most recent time, though, it was someone else, and we can get to that in the other subplot, because we actually know who the other one probably is.
Yeah.
So, but no, really interesting. And again, Ralph does a good job being a kind of a dad here, where he kind of steps in and says, hey, next time he comes around, just say that he should come speak to me himself. But and she has, like, the one lay I didn't like here was when she says, oh, you're the one who's meant to be afraid. It almost felt like the writers watch Poltergeist or something. Well, we have to have the girl say the creepy line of dialogue. Like that line stuck out to me a little bit. It's a little bit cheesy, but for the most part, I really like the scene. And then the other subplot, which is the cop Jack, who's a bit of an asshole, who is a dickhead. He goes and drinks in the strip club. I never even mentioned that it was Paddy Constantine, by the way, who was running the strip club. I forgot to mention it was him. But so he's a bit of a mess anyway. But he goes to this barn. And a pretty well shot scene, I thought, the horror stuff here, where the sort of shapeshifter's kind of behind him in the distance, but then when he turns around, he's kind of gone. It's like you kind of see the shape of a man, but
it's
not...
kind of really traditional stuff. It's nothing like you've not seen before, but it's done well enough, which is kind of all that matters in this moment. Yeah.
And he gets what I would describe as stung in the back of the neck. Obviously, I was thinking of the cut that Terry got, is this the same thing? What's interesting, though, throughout this episode is that this feels a little bit different, because Jack here seems to still be him, but more importantly, though, he's kind of like sick from it, and he's kind of... we end the episode after the prisoner like kills himself. The final moment of the episode is Jack sitting there saying, I'll do what you want, as if he's actually being controlled by the shapeshifter.
It feels more like possession than it does, a separate, entity. It
makes me wonder, though, but is he both? Like, is he also shapeshifted into him, so there's two of them, but he's also controlling, the host?
I'm going to say I hope not, because that really colours Terry's stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, though, because like this was more of it, because we see the cut or the sting in the back of the neck.
This is early days, is what you're saying.
Well, not just that, but it looks far more severe than anything Terry ever had. Like Terry, Terry, like the shapeshifter got Terry's DNA. This seems like, no, the shapeshifter's infected this dude. Like, like he's in pain. Yeah, okay. He's diseased. He's
I think what I mean by the early days bit is, we didn't see Terry in the early days. We know he was off visiting his dad, and the family didn't see him much. So it's possible he went through something like this.
Yeah, and it's also possible it just, it was never a thing because he was far away from the shapeshifter, because, they left, pretty quickly after they had his cut, and there was no influence there. So we have to sort of see more of this to see how this shapes up differently, because certainly what's happened to this guy doesn't necessarily match. But the reason why I'm thinking he's still still shapeshifted into him is because when the daughter describes him like coming round and says he's muscly now, like, I don't get the impression that she saw someone who was like sort of quivering in pain, like the way Jack was, because we saw him at the strip club before this, even in pain already, like saying, make it stop, make it stop. So I get the impression that whoever went to her, her bedroom on that previous night was a bit more, confident and quiet and scary.
It felt like it was probably the same person. Rather than the possessed version.
Yeah, so that's why I'm thinking there's still shapeshifting happening here, but it makes sense that it's him, because she even describes him as more muscly, which, I mean, this guy definitely is versus Jason Bateman. So,
speaking of just details from the describing the quote unquote dream, they made a point of pointing out that they had really creaky stairs, so that they'd hear someone going up. I feel like that could come up later.
Possible, which makes me think he's got it in the window, so he's climbing the outside.
Yeah.
Which means it's possible that he's also got like a, unhuman-like movement or something like that.
I would suspect so, given how he must move pretty fast, given that he was in the room before. When Glory comes running in, and he's not there then when she looks around.
Yeah, and plus with Jack, he kind of seems to like swoosh around the room a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, that's the sort of thing some horror movies will do just because they want to have a scary moment, not because it makes any sense. But in this case, it might actually be, he can actually move that fast.
I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt that it's doing that.
Yeah.
It tracks.
It's not a big deal if it is just cheating a little bit for the horror, because like I let a lot of movies away with that, so I'll let this away with that too.
Yeah, sure. But it tracks for the other details is more the point here, so it would help.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And that's solid. I mean, as much as there's a few little, nitpicks still to be had, I think this. I mean, I like this more than the first two, even because once it's got going here. I like the new character for a start. I thought Holly was really entertaining and likable, and I thought the direction was a lot more confident in several parts of the episode. There's a lot more moments in this one that I think stood out to me as being really good dramatic moments that really kind of struck a chord with me, as opposed to last episode I was really interested in the concept.
I think this is a lot more of a consistent episode in that regard. I don't think it has moments that are quite as high as in some of those first two, like the conversation between Ralph and Terry at night. Like nothing has come close to that, or even the stuff in the therapist last episode I thought was better than probably any individual moment in this one.
Sure. But point of being is, though, it's not nosedived or anything like that. It's still very much something we'll be talking about next week. So we'll be back for more of The Outsider then. But yes, one thing we haven't talked about, though, we didn't talk about the Vergulish scene. We have to talk about this. We can't not talk.
How dare we?
We can't not talk about this.
This was something that I only knew because Pete had tweeted beforehand, before I'd watched the episode, that there was a scene that felt like it was written by Tim Vergulish, who is on one of the other podcasts. Pete can tell you all about that in a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I know what this is about, probably. I narrowed it down to a handful of things. I didn't.
Yeah, you didn't get the right one. This was such a... I mean, for you, it was probably... Because I set it up, for you, it was probably a laugh out loud moment. For me, it was more of a delirious laugh, where I'm like, wait, what's happening? Is she talking about this? What? So basically, Jeannie goes to see her like the next day after they've had this scene with the daughter and that, to check up and see how they're doing. And she's like, "No, I don't have any ulterior motives. I'm just genuinely wanting to check up on you and the kids and see how you are." And Glory opens up, and this was kind of how I was saying about how it kind of shows that Ralph and Terry aren't necessarily a million miles away from each other in terms of what types of dads they were, because she then tells this story that kind of, it's kind of similar where, when our oldest daughter, she was at a friend's house, she was about 7, and this girl's older brother made them watch a horror movie. Leprechaun. And I laughed really hard, actually, because the very next line after she says what movie it was, she says, "I could have killed that kid." It really made me laugh. Because for my context, it's not because it was a 7-year-old watching a horror movie. It was just because leprechauns. Going to show them something better than that.
Of course, Tim was like, "Yeah, sure, leprechaun."
Yeah, I'm like, is this character meant to be Tim? Did Tim get like written into like the mythology of this, Stephen King universe?
Yeah, I feel like this is the point where we should suggest that you go and watch the Leprechaun review that Pete and Tim did, and really appreciate the song.
Yeah. We've reviewed Leprechaun 1, 2, and 3 so far on Screams After Midnight. Feel free to go check those out.
So far, they're doing them all.
Oh yeah, so far. But basically, she explains that she was scared there was a leprechaun in the house, and Terry said, much like Jeannie was saying before, that you go along with it, and she says, well, yeah, of course there's leprechauns, but they're not allowed to leave Ireland, so you're fine. There's none here. And she's like, oh, that makes sense then. And that was it. She went to bed. So that was I couldn't believe when she said leprechaun. I just was, oh my god, what? How?
Yeah.
How?
Of all the things. I agree. I think it was funnier for me because I'd seen your tweet beforehand.
Yeah.
So I was like, all episode I was waiting for, like, what is it? What's coming up?
You were thinking it was going to be like a pizza debate. Somehow Hellboy was going to get mentioned.
Something to do with goats crossed my mind. Given that
goats.
Goats are pretty, common in horror things.
Yeah. Nope, leprechaun.
Didn't have leprechaun on my list.
But yes, let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show, you can do that by rating the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars. More people will find us that way. You can also, of course, share us out on social media. And you can support us financially over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv. And you can do that for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses. You get some outtakes. You get an exclusive bonus episode of some of our movie podcasts. Screams After Midnight being one of them that I just mentioned. So go and have a look at some of that stuff. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?